Hello my friends, it's time to take another art break, and today I'm going to share with you these simple to paint roses using some watercolor. Now this is easy to do. If you can plop and drop paint, you can paint these. Now if you'd like a little help drawing, I got you covered. I do have a sketchbook membership. That's where I have all of the tracers for any of the paintings I do on my YouTube channel. It's very reasonably priced. You get the tracers, the color chart, reference of the colors I used, as well as a reference photo to inspire you when you are painting yours. It's easy to join, very reasonably priced, and I'd love to have more creative friends join me. You can click that QR code and that'll direct you right over to my Ko-fi page. Well, let's get started, and I can't wait to show you how you can easily paint these and then add some elements like words. Perhaps you even want to add a little bit of stitching on the outside. There's so many fun ways to use this simple and easy to paint watercolor roses. Let's make some pretty cards. Now there's lots of ways you can do this. I'm going to show you a watercolor way with a little bit of mixed media in there. This one's got a little bit of pencil in there too. So I'm going to show you different ways to be able to create these. For the size of the watercolor paper, I'm doing it on a 5x5. The backer paper, which is this little colorful edge all the way around, is cut 1/4 inch bigger, so it's 5 1/4. And then the card size I'm using is 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. I bought these at Michael's, I believe is where I bought them. So they're already pre-done the size, so they work great for this. Now for a heart can be a little tricky to get it exactly the same on one side versus the other. I do like using a template to create my hearts with. If you're in my sketchbook membership, I'll give you a template. You can just simply cut it out and use it for your cards. But if you don't have a template, just basically fold your paper in half like you used to do as a child in school, trace half of your heart and then cut it out. And when you open it, it will be the same on one side or the other. That can work too. Well, when setting up these cards, I wanted to point out there's a couple ways you can do this as far as setting up the design. For this particular design, I do like having some of the flowers to touch the actual heart or to keep the shape of the heart. Maybe it's easier to show on this one. So when I'm setting up these card designs, I like having the two larger hearts at the corners here. And then you could drop down and do another one, so you're creating this triangle effect. And then you kind of fill in around it. So when you're picking out the sizes, I like including mid-size ones and then small ones. So that's just going to create that pretty look. So here again, it's that triangle shape, then mid-size ones and smaller. But I like having the roses kind of follow that heart shape so you don't lose that heart shape. Now you can leave some white spaces in between completely, or you can fill your heart up all of the way and then include some of the leaves around there. So there's going to be a couple ways. I'm going to show you how to paint this style in particular, and then we'll start from there. And there's lots of ways you can finish this off. For the watercolor, I'm just going to be using the sets I have. I have this little inexpensive set here. You've seen me use it many times. One of the main reasons why I like to use this little set is because it has these light colors in it, and it also has this neon pink. I use that color often. I really like that color. I'm going to be using that, and then I'm also going to be using my Paul Rubin colors. I like the purples and the reds in this set as well, and the greens in this set in particular. So I'm going to use a combination of both, but you can always use just whatever you have. Well, let's go ahead and we'll speed this video up, and I'll show you the beginning stages of how I lay out the roses on my paper. To begin with, I'm going to lightly sketch the round circles, the large ones at the top. Kind of think of Mickey Mouse ears. Going to pop down to the side, to the left-hand side, and make a similar size of the roses that I did on the top. Now I'm going to be filling in the medium and the small. I like having those little small ones at the point. It just keeps that heart shape really well. With this design, I'm going to be leaving some open spaces so I can draw in the leaves. I'm going to be doing little clusters of leaves. I'm starting in the middle, and anytime you do a cluster of leaves, it's nice to have a little bit of a curve to it. So at the top, I'm making sure my leaves kind of curve around and they're not just pointing straight up, and on the sides, they're slightly curving as well. To lighten my pencil marks, I'm using a kneaded eraser. If I use a kneaded eraser, my pencil marks won't smear, and I can just lift the graphite color. I'm going to be doing this particular one, so I'm going to be starting with the flowers first and then doing the green. If I put the green down first, you're going to see it more directly underneath that rose, and I really don't want that look. So I'm going to start with the roses first and then layer on the other color. Now, when starting the roses, I need to kind of decide which direction I want them to be at. And this way I could put the darker areas where I want the centers to be. And that's going to give the direction of which way the rose is going to point out. I'm going to be doing a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to start with some water, start with my lightest colors first, and then blend it on the top. So this is just very much a layering process. So I'm going to start with my lightest and then work with my dark. When choosing the colors, I thought I would do a combination of some coral, peachy color roses, as well as some more pink and purplish color. And then I added a third color in there too, a little bit of red. So basically, I'm kind of doing a whole bunch of different colors. You could keep them very similar and make all your roses the same, or you could switch it up and have a variety. I'm going to be starting with my peachy coral ones, so I'm picking out a 3 area of where I want to put that color. So at the top and on the side is where I chose to do those. I started with the peach and then popped in a little bit of the lighter pink. Now I'm kind of creating more of the reddish color with a little bit of purple in it, so I chose one off to the side. I'm going to go in the middle, and then I'll be layering some of that color down below. I kind of want to spread it out a little bit, and if you think of triangle shapes, that'll just give your eye a nice way to move around your painting. I'm not looking to finish my roses all in one step. This is very much the blend on blend look, the wet watercolor look, where I'm tapping in a couple of colors. It's wet on wet, so I put in one color first, then I tap in the darker color, and those colors will mix and blend on their own, and I'll see what I get after they dry. When adding these little colors in, I'm basically tapping in little C kind of shapes inside of there. That's about as structured as I'm getting. I'm not looking to paint individual petals at this stage. I'm just looking at having a darker center and then some variation of the colors around the little flowers. These are meant to be very loose and playful flowers, nothing too structured. At this stage, I give my painting a dry, and with watercolor, it always dries lighter, so then you can go ahead and add your next layers. I'm basically going to be using the same colors I just put on, but because it's watercolor and it's translucent, you're going to see the layering of the color process. Once I have this step completed, I'm going to give them another dry, and then I switch to an angle brush. I like using this flat surface, and I'm going to be creating some crisscrossy triangle shapes, irregular ones, in the inside of my flowers. That's just going to create a little bit more of a different petal look than what my round brush does. You could switch your colors up, use the different ones on the very top, or you can use the same ones you've been using on each of the flowers. I'm choosing to mix it up just a little bit. Once the flowers have had plenty of time to dry, I'm going to start working on the leaves. I have about 3 different shades of green sitting in my palette, and I'm going to start with the lightest shade of green and paint the leaf shapes that I have already drawn in. Once I have that leaf shape painted in with my lightest color, I'm going to use a little bit darker shade of green and tap it at the base of each of the leaf. Once that color hits the base of that leaf, it should be drawn up into that lighter shade of green. It's a real pretty look to be able to paint a simple leaf. I did decide to mix up a little bit more blue-green and added that to the top of my leaves as well. I'm just looking to add just a tiny bit more interest to those colors. To work on the background, to fill in those little negative spaces of where my leaves aren't, I mixed up just a light shade of blue, and I'm putting that in those areas. I'm still keeping with inside of the heart shape. I'm looking to fill in the blue area to cover up the white space in that area. Once that light shade of blue was on, I took a little bit of the Payne's Gray, which is even a little darker shade of blue, and tapped it into those spaces while my paper was still wet in that area. This is just going to kind of create a real pretty shade of navy, a little dark and light shade of that blue underneath there. It makes that heart shape really pop out now that I've added that darker blue in the background. The next step is to add all the little scribbly bits or the extra little areas. You can stop at this point if you're happy with your heart. You don't have to do any of this extra detail, but I kind of like adding all the little extra scribbles, so I'm going to be using my color pencils for this step. I like to start with my white pencil first. That way I can center off the area where I'm going to be calling my center. I like to create that real loose and twisting that pencil in my hand and going around that shape to kind of get a little bit more definition of the petals. This shade of orange looked really pretty on top of the flowers as well. You just have to practice a little bit or experiment to see what colors might pop over the top of the flowers that you created. This light shade of purple worked really well on some of my other darker purplish red flowers. And a little bit of orange worked as well. You just get to be as creative as you like. Then for the leaves, I love using that little bit of an extra kind of a tealy green and a little bit softer shade of the greens too. I go past where my watercolor is. I'm not trying to make it an exact, like a color book style. I'm going out with more whimsical line work. I'm going to be switching to my Kimberly 9XXB pencil, which is a very soft graphite pencil, to add a little bit more definition to the line work of inside of my leaves. I'm going to be creating the little stems and the little lines inside of my leaves. I'm still using very loose line work, but this is just going to add just a tiny bit of definition. To add a little bit more color to the blue area and to pop out that heart shape just a little bit more, I'm using a blue colored pencil on the blue areas of the heart. For a little bit more bright white, I'm going to switch to the Sharpie China marker, just to add a few little scribbles of that bright white color. I thought my flowers could use a little bit of bright gold dots in the centers, and this Deco Art color marker works perfect to add those bright pops of gold to the centers. I do it to the center of the flowers, and then I put a few little multiple dots in the background too. Now to finish off the edges, I'm using some Stays On black ink and creating that little dark edge all the way around. As an added touch, I created a fabric tag to go on the front. I'm using the same ink pad and I'm using it on the top of some coffee stained fabric. Put some fabric underneath the fabric you want to stamp. That way when you press down using your stamp, it'll make a nice little even print all the way across the fabric. I'm going to simply just glue this on to the front of my card, but before I glue it on, I want to give my card at least a couple coats of matte varnish. That way it'll seal in all the watercolor elements. Well, let's take a look and see what they look like hanging in my studio. And here they are, sitting amongst some of the other Valentine items I've created so far on my YouTube channel for this Valentine season. I think these cards were super fun to paint. The shapes were easy, the colors were fun, all the little extra scribbly bits really do add a layer of interest, and adding the little addition of words brought them all together. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really does help YouTube push my video out there. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll create right along with me.